Hello everyone, you are watching Think Poll and I'm Waqas Abdullah. We are the witness of the political change and the political shift into the Gulf nation. The question is being raised, why the Trump administration always prioritized the Gulf nation? When the Trump became the first time the president of the United States of America, he visited the Gulf, especially the Saudi Arabia. And the second time he followed the same pattern. Why? Why Saudi Arabia has been signed $142 billion weapons deal with the United States of America? Is the new policy of the Donald Trump and the Trump administration to eradicate the dominance of the China on the Arab Peninsula? Why? Why Trump accept the request of the Prime Minister and the Crown Prince of the Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, to waive the sanction from the Syria? But these requests are not within the favor of the friend of United States of America. I'm talking about Israel. There is many questions regarding the recent visit of the toward the Gulf nations. We have a great guest today, Professor Dave, that who have been country director to the Pakistan, as well as he served in NATO and many international organizations. He have expertise into the Middle Eastern politics and the U.S. policies toward the Arab Peninsula. Professor Dave, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's an honor.
Dr. Dave, my first question is to you regarding the recent visit of the Donald Trump toward the Gulf nation. We are the witness when Donald Trump became the president of the first time in his first reign, he visited the Saudi Arabia. Now he followed the same pattern. He visited the Saudi Arabia again. Not even Saudi Arabia, but Qatar, UAE as well, where he signed millions of dollar project. What do you think about? What is the significance of these visits? And the question is to you: is this the part of the broader strategy of the Trump administration to counter the dominance of the China from the Arab Peninsula as well?
Well, I think that there's always, you can always phrase any foreign visit in the context of a U.S.-China rivalry. But I think a little bit of that's overstated. I think the main reason for it is that these countries offer a couple of unique things for President Trump, specifically in the United States in general. So the first thing is they're security partners of the United States, but they're security partners who pay their own way. So it's not, even Europe, is heavily dependent. The American taxpayer subsidizes European security. And we do even in the Gulf to a certain extent. But, they're trying to have domestic defense industries, but they're not evolved into competitors. So there's going to be support for the U.S. defense industrial base in terms of orders and things when he goes there. The second reason is President Trump is a very polarizing figure globally, and places that presidents traditionally go for their first visits, Canada, Europe, he has a great degree of unpopularity in those places, and there'll be protests against him. But there are no protests in the Gulf on either side of the Gulf unless the regime there wants it. So they can literally lay out the red carpet. And for Trump in Saudi Arabia, they actually laid out a purple carpet, which is, hasn't been used before. I mean, that evokes the eastern part of the Roman Empire. It's an unprecedented honor shown to President Trump that hasn't been extended to other heads of state. So they can put on welcoming ceremonies without worrying about them being disrupted by protests or things of that nature. And then finally, I think that the individual rulers in the Gulf states really welcome Trump. They are sincere in that they prefer to deal with Trump than they did with his predecessors because they view him as a businessman, and they are the leaders of the Gulf states at heart view everything as a commercial transaction. That's just their natural frame of dealing with the West and with America. And in Trump, they think that they found a guy that they can do business with who actually understands them, who won't give them lectures about the need for reform in their systems.
So you are talking about the personality of the Donald Trump. So my question is to you, if we're comparing the personality of the Donald Trump with the Joe Biden, he was also the president of the United States of America. He visited the kingdom, but he didn't treat it equally as the Trump treated right now and his past reigns. So what do you think about? Even MBS did not shake hand with the Joe Biden. why the Trump administration always are being a good to make the camaraderie with the Gulf nation, but the Joe Biden administration failed to make the bridges, to build the bridges between the Gulf nations.
Yeah. Well, it's more than just body language. I mean, when, Biden ran for office saying that he was going to make the crown prince a pariah. And when Biden went to the Gulf, he did it reluctantly. He alienated a significant part of the base in his political party, but he had to go for reasons of state because Saudi Arabia is an important security partner in the United States. The crown prince did not greet President Biden at the airport. They sent the deputy director of Riyadh, the Riyadh province, which is such a minor figure for the head of the United States, that was an insult. Then, of course, you had the famous fist. Biden wouldn't shake hands with the crown prince, but they did a fist bump. And then immediately after the meeting, when Biden got back to the United States, he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, in our private meetings, I gave him hell. I talked about nothing but human rights over and over again," which of course is not a conversation Saudis ever want to have. They need to have it from the United States in particular, but it's not one that they want to have. And it's, past presidents, regardless of their party, have usually held that conversation in private. But I think Biden was speaking to his base, who was criticizing him for going to Saudi Arabia. The contrast with Donald Trump, who is probably not going to give a lecture on human rights and the need for democratic reform and things of that, could not be more outstanding. So the crown prince greeted him at the airport. The greeting was more effusive. You had at all three stops, his presidential airplane was escorted by fighter aircraft of the arriving country. I spoke about the purple carpet, not a red carpet, but actually an upgrade to a purple carpet in Riyadh. And then the fact that there were major business deals signed in each of those stops, which that's kind of how Trump.
Recently, major deals have been signed in the Middle East. What do you think about? What's your analysis on that? These developments are connected to the shifting in the global alliance and particularly a challenge to the presence of the China into the Middle East.
Yeah, I think that because there is sort of a full spectrum global rivalry between the United States and China, anything the United States does can be seen as countering China. Anything China does can be seen as countering the United States. But I think that, a theory that explains everything ultimately explains nothing. And I think that when you look at the Gulf, there's an internal dynamic, a U.S. Gulf dynamic, that precedes the rivalry with China and really has its own momentum and its own logic. And that is the fact that, first off, we are the longest standing security partner of the Gulf states. And we are an indispensable security partner. China can occasionally have security arrangements. Usually it's in technology that the United States won't supply. So things like ballistic missiles or armed drones, if they can't do that, or along the margins where, for example, they're worried about the possibility of sanctions because of human rights or, the conduct of Saudi military operations in Yemen. So when the United States backs away from that, then China will fill in. The Gulf leaders are well aware that if they are invaded, as Kuwait was by Saddam Hussein, only the United States has the ability to move significant combat forces in a rapid period of time. So, people talk about the United States replacing China. No, that's going to take, that will not happen during President Trump's lifetime, if it happens at all. China is primarily a commercial player in the Gulf. They welcome security in the Gulf because they're dependent on it for exports and for imports of energy. But at the end of the day, they are not a major security provider in the Gulf. Only the United States and the Gulf states themselves can play that role.
But the thing it is, when the President of Trump giving a speech in the World Economic Forum in Riyadh, he expressed that he accept the request of the MBS to waive the sanction from the Syria. The question is, which is taken by the Trump administration and the Trump, which is not welcomed by the Israel, because Israel sees Syria and the new regime of this in the Syria as a rival in the region. So what do you think about this step of the Trump administration? Are going to be a clear-cut message that the Syria and the Middle East are be more essential for us, but not Israel anymore? What's your analysis on that?
Yeah, uh, I don't think Israel's being ignored. I think that in the long term, the strategic interests of Israel are best served by having a stable Syria, as long as the Syria is non-hostile to Israel. And I think that there might be a slight difference here about the nature of the Syrian regime. The Iraqi government has extreme concerns because they're worried that this might provide a cover for another resurgence of Daesh or a group like Daesh that, let us not forget, was stopped on the outskirts of Baghdad. The goal is shared by the United States, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Israel, and Iraq, and Turkey, which is they want a stable Syria that doesn't threaten its neighbors, either by being a strong, hostile Syria or by being a weak Syria that allows organizations like Daesh to incubate, sink, safe haven, and destabilize the region. So the question is, how do you get about doing it? I think Israel feels that the time is not right to engage with this regime in Syria. And so they're conducting almost daily strikes against potential, Syrian military infrastructure facilities that could potentially, in the hands of a strong hostile Syria, be used to attack Israel. That's one approach. I think that the United States and the Gulf states have decided that this is a regime that may have issues, but we need to foster, we need to incubate, because it's probably the best we can hope for. And what we want to do is give them the chance to establish themselves, to conduct operations, to secure their own borders, and we can negotiate with them and focus them in a positive direction by engaging them now. So Qatar and the Saudis have made major financial inputs to paying civil service salaries, to helping prevent default on Syria's national debt. I think that in the context of the business, they came to President Trump and said, look, we have put a lot of money in this country. What we're asking you to do is to waive, not eliminate, because this will have to be done, but waive sanctions so that there might be some sort of business confidence to help give them the fundamentals of stability. That's a tactical decision, but there might be differences with Iraq, with Israel, over that tactical decision, but the strategic goal is shared by all these countries.
As previously we talked about, Trump accept the request of the MBS to waive the sanction from Syria, but also at the same time, while giving a speech in the World Economic Forum, President Trump also we talked about to show his desire toward the MBS, the Crown Prince of the Saudi Arabia, to accept the Israel. What do you think about in the current circumstances, Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries, specifically Saudi Arabia and MBS, is going to accept the Israel as a state or not?
Well, not under the current circumstances. I think that there is a desire, and the consensus in the United States is that if Israel were to be recognized by Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia as the custodian of the holy places, the keeper of the two mosques, that would serve as a sort of influencer for the rest of the Islamic world. And obviously there'd be outliers. There always are. But once Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel, then the rest of the world can deal with Israel as a more or less normal country, and that will put to bed 3 generations of animosity and what is viewed in the West as sort of dysfunctional chaos. I understand that logic. I accept that logic. That was the logic that Jordan, Egypt, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, that is the logic they had in making peace with Israel. The problem is what happens of the Palestinians. There had been among elites this kind of view that the Palestinians were their own worst enemy and that we shouldn't hold up our development, our normalization because of the Palestinians. But in public opinion, and public opinion matters in these countries, it doesn't matter as much as it does in the Western democracies where officials are elected, but it still matters. The Palestinian cause remains very, very popular. And the corruption and inefficiency and intransigence of the various Palestinian leadership, whether it's Hamas or Fatah, that is not considered to be relevant. So right now with the war in Gaza, the popular view, which is no normalization until we see progress towards a Palestinian state, that is in the ascendant. And the more pragmatic, I would argue, elite view, which is widely but not popularly shared among elites and rulers in the region, which is the Palestinians, that basically we've sacrificed our interests for their sake for too long. They haven't done enough to help themselves. That view is in the background. It's being kept quiet. So the people in the Biden administration have said they were very close to getting a deal for the Saudis to recognize Israel, and then October 7th happened. I don't know whether that's true or not. I know that Trump would like to work towards that, but my assessment is that there will be no normalization, no further normalization by any Arab or Islamic state until after Gaza is resolved and the situation of governance and everyday living in Gaza is resolved in a manner that seems to be sustainable.
As we know that the Saudi Arabia did a good relation with the Iran, and same goes for the US. But the China played mediator role to build the bridge between the both nations. What do you think about due to this deal between the US and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is flare up the tension again between the Iran and Saudi Arabia as well? And what's your analysis about that? Is somehow US spurred the offensive approach of Kingdom Saudi Arabia toward the Iran? Do you think that?
Yeah. So I don't think the idea is that we're building Saudi capacity to invade Iran. High-tech weaponry will not lead to the overthrow of the really the Revolutionary Guard regime, which controls Iran these days. There's been sort of a creeping coup there. What would be required would be sustained presence on the ground, which the Saudi military is not really oriented for. They're not really built for that. I think that what we want to do is we want to see Saudi Arabia and all the Gulf states in a position where they can defend themselves against, against Iran. Iran has explicitly threatened the Gulf states, saying, with rocket attacks, with missile attacks, equipped various proxy forces who have launched missiles into Saudi Arabia and the UAE. They have attacked Saudi Arabia's most important oil facility with cruise missiles and drones. They've attacked the largest oil store. So there's active hostility there. And these are partners who, heck, I mean, the Iranians have also fired ballistic missiles into Pakistan, for crying out loud. But you've got a country here that is not at all hesitant to threaten and to even attack its neighbors. So it makes sense to support these neighbors, particularly when they are close security partners to the United States. I should note here that this $142 billion figure, historically, in the first Trump administration, he announced a figure, I think it was $60 billion. And when I took a look at that, only about $17 billion of what was offered was new. So it's possible that we're dealing with something here like that. And I think that we won't see, I would be very, very surprised if we saw more than about a third of that figure in new sales that are actually consummated to this. Will be declined, some will not be approved, some will not move forward for various technical reasons or financial reasons, or just because the Saudis don't want it. So I'm on what exactly was offered, and when I find out, I will track it over time. But I think the ultimate figure will be far less than $142 billion.
And in the last question is out of the box. I know that you have any expertise into the Middle Eastern politics, but you must be aware the recent war has been occurred between India and Pakistan, but Pakistan has been claimed that he shot down French technology Rafale, which is used by the India. What do you think about, as a neutral perspective? Do you think that this is happened into the Indo-Pak war, that Pakistan Air Force shot down Rafale? Is it possible? What do you think? What is your neutral perspective on that issue?
Yeah, so it's really kind of interesting. I mean, Um, I think that when I look at the various tactics there, I think there's two things. First off, I think that the first off, we don't have fidelity here. Both sides are kind of denying, have different interpretations of what happened. But let me go with the Pakistani narrative, which is that Pakistan shot down advanced Russian and French aircraft flown by the Indian Air Force that were over Indian airspace. So that indicates two possibilities to me. The first is that even though the aircraft that Pakistan's reported to use were Chinese, the doctrine used by the Pakistani Air Force is overwhelmingly NATO in origin, which means it's compatible with US doctrine. So you've got Chinese equipment, but used in an American and European way of doing it. And I think what we saw there was if the Pakistani narrative of damage is correct, two assumptions. The first one is that I think there was a false assumption about the inviolability of the border and the willingness, the political decision on behalf of the Pakistani leadership to recognize something as a threat before it crossed the international border. The second thing is I think that the and we saw this in Ukraine. Most of the Indian armed forces are equipped and organized along Russian lines rather than Western lines. And Russian military doctrine generally assumes command of the electromagnetic spectrum. And I think that they did not effectively deny the electromagnetic spectrum to the Pakistani forces, who were able to intercept conversations among aircraft and able to locate aircraft much more effectively than I think the Russian doctrine assumes or allows for offensive operations. So I think what we're going to see is an investment in electronic warfare, jamming, counter jamming, location of enemy air defenses. I don't think there's any great equipment variance here. There's a lot of beyond visual range missiles available on the international market. And I think that that is the success that we've seen, if the Pakistani narrative is correct, is not so much a triumph of weaponry as it is a triumph of doctrine and permissive instructions on engagement.
So you think that Pakistan shut down Indians French technology Rafale, which is used by the Indian Air Force to target the Pakistan? You agree with the statement by the Pakistan? Is that right?
Pakistani narrative is correct, which is that the Pakistani Air Force has shot down, 2 Rafales, 3, advanced SUs and MiGs. If that is correct, what that would indicate to me is that the Indian Air Force, first off, they thought they had a political assumption which was incorrect, which was that the Pakistanis would not engage aircraft on the other side of the border. Okay. So that's the first assumption, which is that's a political decision, not a weapon decision. The second lesson, if this narrative is correct, is that the Indian Air Force neglected to establish dominance of the electromagnetic spectrum, which allowed the Pakistani Air Force to locate, intercept, and target these aircraft. And that's in modern warfare, that's just careless.
Thank you very much, Professor Dave, for joining us for your essential time for the Think Poll and my show. Thank you very much for highlighting and shed light on some essential facts and figures toward the Gulf nations and the U.S. Specifically policy, and the Trump administration policy, and the recent visit to the Gulf nation. Thank you very much to talk about and give your savvy analysis for my audience. Thank you very much for joining us.